Welcome to a special bonus edition of Cappuccino with the Saints. Normally on Saturday, but this week it'll be on Wednesday, this special bonus episode. So I hope you enjoy. It gets even wilder this week in this special bonus episode of Saturday Cappuccino with the Saints. This episode, we explore the intriguing subject of the Seraphim, Cherubim, and the whole hierarchy of characters in the spiritual world. Beings with the face of a man, the body of a bull, and the wings of eagles. Flying snakes, wheels with eyes. It can all be very strange and confusing. Some of the most enigmatic and mysterious passages of the Bible refer to these beings, and this week they will be explored in depth. And, contrary to what you may think, they are not only referenced in our Bible. They show up everywhere in the ancient world, from Jerusalem to Japan. Understanding this imagery is difficult for modern people, and this week we will try and make sense of it all. We turn now our attention to the angelic order. Now, just where did we get this idea of there being a celestial angelic order? We've all heard the term choirs of angels, but that term is not referring to singing. It is much bigger. This idea has a starring role in Scripture and theology, with deep biblical roots. While the Bible mentions various types of angels, like the seraphim in Isaiah 6, the cherubim in Genesis 3 and Ezekiel 10, and archangels, Daniel 10 and Luke 1, it doesn't exactly lay out a formal hierarchy. The concept of choirs, in these 9 choirs I'm going to be talking about, is extrapolated from scattered resources. Much of our understanding of this celestial hierarchy came from a man who's considered a saint in the Eastern Orthodox Church, Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite. I can't say that fast. He was a 5th century mystic who wrote the celestial hierarchy, which systemized the angelic orders into 3 triads of 3 choirs each. His influence has been monumental in shaping medieval angelology. Another man who is greatly influential in our modern understanding of angels is St. Thomas Aquinas, a friend of the show. I talk about him all the time. In his Summa Theologica, Aquinas elaborated on Dionysius's framework, and he integrated it into his scholastic theology. He described the choir's roles in mediating divine will and interacting with humanity. And another person who was greatly influential in kind of carving out this theology of angels was another friend of the show, one of my favorites, St. Gregory the Great. He contributed to the tradition by referencing the 9 orders in his homilies and writings. The 9 orders that we're going to be discussing are divided into 3 triads. The first, the order closest to God, are composed of the seraphim, cherubim, and thrones. And these are going to be the ones we're going to talk about this episode. It's going to get very, very strange. So get ready. It's going to be a very enjoyable episode. Now, I immediately can feel the umbrage rising in my fellow American viewers. We chafe at this. We hate hierarchy. We loathe it. Our whole national character is built on a rejection of hierarchy. And look, I get that. But this is, again, an example of us reading back into the text our modern 21st century, quite American worldview. And as if you needed reminding, which you don't, of course, that is not a worldview that the authors of the Bible had, the readers of the text originally had, or one, to be quite honest, that's frankly based on empirical reality. Because here's the thing. Hierarchy, whether you like it or not, exists everywhere. It is all through the natural world. It seems to be embedded into the very DNA of human civilization. Now, we may not like this, and it may offend our quote-unquote democratic sensibilities, but it is one of those brute fact realities of life. And the authors of the Bible and the theologians who crafted the doctrine of the hierarchy of the angelic realm did not share our worldview on this. So put down your don't tread on me flags for a minute and just absorb what is being actually said. Every human society that has ever existed has some form of hierarchy. The most common example, and one that the writers of the Bible would have been well versed in, is the idea of ranks of nobility, with a king or emperor at the top, grand dukes on the next level flowing down through the ranks of marquess, earls, viscounts, and barons. For the overwhelming time humans have lived on Earth, this has been the basic structure of human society, with the nobility and its ranks at the top governing each rank below. And it isn't just monarchy systems that have hierarchies. Democratic societies do as well, with the executive branch led by the president, a legislative branch writing laws, with all sorts of chairmen or chairwomen occupying positions of power, and a judicial system with the Supreme Court ruling over lower courts. We just can't escape hierarchy. It's everywhere. Our military certainly is a hierarchy. They don't poll the group to see whether we should attack that hill over there. We have generals, colonels, majors, captains, lieutenants, sergeants, corporals, privates, all arranged into a strict chain of command. It's how the system is able to function at all. The church isn't immune. It too has a hierarchy, from pope to cardinal to archbishop to bishop to monsignor to parish priest. The church certainly is not immune to structure and order. It, like everyone else, requires it in order to function properly. It's also true in the secular private industry segment of the world. Every company, private or public, in the world has a structure that, more or less, follows the same pattern, with the president at the top, managers in the middle, and workers at the bottom. I honestly can't think of a single organization that does not have this same basic setup. And it is not just human organizations. Animals have hierarchies. Some are quite rigid and vicious, like wolves. The term alpha wolf came from somewhere, and it came from this fact, that every wolf pack in the world has an alpha male leading it and beta males following. Wolves don't have a focus group on deciding on how to attack that herd of elk. And even the whole natural world falls into a hierarchy, with minerals and non-living material at the bottom, flowing up through plant life, to lower forms of life like worms, higher forms like birds, even higher forms like wolves, and then dogs, to finally conscious, living, rational, thinking beings, us. Thomas Aquinas taught that human beings, with an immortal soul and made in the image of God, were the pinnacle of the material world, but the lowest in the angelic. We occupy that space due to the fact that we have an immortal soul, where the seen and the unseen realm overlapped. We, too, are part of this great celestial hierarchy. And it may hurt our feelings to realize this, but we are a part of this great celestial hierarchy, and we ain't at the top. So, given that hierarchy is everywhere, wouldn't it be odd, then, that the unseen realm would not, like all the rest of reality, be structured into a hierarchy? If you consider the jump and the levels of being from worm to man, would it not be an incredible leap to go from man straight to God with no intervening beings in between us? That seems to me to be completely irrational to believe that. And it was the basic idea, the idea of hierarchies and cobbling together with the few stories of human interaction with the divine realm found in the Bible, that theologians like Dionysius the Areopagite, St. Thomas Aquinas, and St. Gregory the Great worked out their theory on the angelic realms. It is all conjecture, of course, but it is a good way to at least try and understand something that by its nature almost defies human comprehension. And to kick off this episode's discussion of the ranks of the angelic realm, specifically the Seraphim and the Cherubim, I once again am going to turn to one of my favorite and best resources on the internet, the Bible Project. So enjoy.
We've been talking about spiritual beings in the Bible, and we've looked at how God is in the heavenly realms, but not by himself. There's a whole staff team that the Bible calls the Divine Council.
But in the Bible, there are still more beings in the spiritual realm, like the cherubim and also the angels.
So let's talk about them. Okay, first, the cherubim. These are chubby little babies with wings, right?
No, you gotta get that image out of your head. Cherubim, or in Hebrew, cherubim, they're way more fascinating. They're described as hybrid creatures, a collage of different animals, and every time they do appear, they look a little bit different.
That's intense.
Yeah, they're supposed to be intimidating. They stand guard at the boundary between heaven and earth. If you see them, you know you're entering the presence of the one who is above all and truly other.
The first time cherubim show up in the story of the Bible, they're standing outside of the Garden of Eden.
Right, the garden is God's temple residence, and so he places these spiritual bodyguards at the entrance so that the rebel humans can't get back in and ruin everything.
But the biblical story is about how God wants us back in his presence.
Yes, exactly. So this is why he chose the people of Israel and gave them the gift of a symbolic miniature Eden called the tabernacle, and then later the Jerusalem temple. In both of these spaces, cherubim were painted and engraved all over, reminding the priests that they are working in God's presence.
Now, if a priest went into the Holy of Holies, he would see there a golden box called the Ark of the Covenant, and on it were two cherubim. What's going on here?
Well, the biblical authors describe the ark as the footstool of God's throne, which the cherubim are carrying. Like we read in Psalm 99, God sits enthroned above the cherubim.
But there was no actual throne above the box.
Right, the Israelites weren't supposed to represent God with any physical image. But when the prophets had visions about this space, they saw Yahweh sitting on his throne.
Okay, so cherubim guard the sacred space, carry God's throne, but why do they look like animal mashups?
Well, they're symbolic representations of all the creatures of the earth, because they all belong to God. This is why in Isaiah's vision, all of the creatures are singing. Everything that fills the earth is God's glory.
Like a choir.
Yeah, through the cherubim, all creation offers praise to its maker.
Great, that's the cherubim. Now let's talk about angels. I'm way more familiar with them, human-like figures with feathery wings.
No, wait, stop. Angels in the Bible don't have wings.
What? No wings?
No angel wings. In fact, angels are often mistaken for people because they look like us, just a bit more impressive.
But the cherubim have wings.
Yeah, and the angels are different because they have a different purpose.
Okay, which is?
Well, humans can't just march into God's realm, so God will reach out to us, and he often does so through these spiritual ambassadors.
So angels are like spiritual messengers.
Yeah, in fact, that's what the word angel means, a messenger.
Right, this happens a lot in the Bible, like the angel who tells Mary she's pregnant with Jesus.
Yeah, and then the other main role of angels is to perform missions on God's behalf.
Sometimes they rescue people from danger, like when Peter is released from prison. And there's some really cool angels, like Michael and Gabriel.
Yeah, the name Gabriel means God is my power, and Michael means who is like God. But also notice, these names point to God, not to the angels. Like humans, the angels are images of God's presence and power.
But still, how cool would it be to meet an angel?
Yeah, and maybe you will, and maybe you already have. But no one in the Bible is ever encouraged to go looking for angels, and when angels do show up, people are usually puzzled or freaked out.
So, angels are really awesome, but they play a supporting role in the Bible.
Yes, because God's ultimate purpose is to bring humans back into his presence in a reunited heaven and earth. And in the meantime, he uses angels to guide and to serve his people.
That was another excellent video by the Bible Project and a good overview of what we're going to be talking about over the next few minutes. But the best place to start when talking about the angelic realm and the hierarchies is right at the top, with that most mysterious and hard to comprehend order of angels, the Seraphim. The Seraphim are the highest order of angels, and they communicate directly with God. Their primary function is to worship God, radiating divine love and maintaining the purity of heaven. They don't deliver messages or intervene in earthly affairs like lower angels do. Instead, they ignite purify, and anchor divine truth. And not only are they the highest of all the angels, they are also the highest of this first triad we're going to be talking about. The other beings in this triad are the cherubim and the thrones. They are notoriously difficult to depict in visual form. The descriptions given in the Bible are really hard for us to wrap our head around. I mean, six-winged creatures that cover their face with their wings and their feet. It's hard to depict. But what you see on your screen now is one of the images that have been recorded of the seraphim, and it's from the apse of the Hagia Sophia, where the seraphim are depicted above the high altar. They were there and in full glory up until the 16th century, when the church was desecrated by the Muslims by turning it into a mosque. This image is from the 9th century mosaic that was put on the central dome, and the seraphim are depicted in red. They were the guardians of the main image of Christ that's also depicted on the dome. Their faces were covered with stars in 1609 in the reign of the Ottoman Sultan Ahmed, and remained so until 2009, when they were uncovered because the mosque had been turned into a museum. Sadly, I think it's being turned back into a mosque, so we'll see whether these mosaics remain uncovered or not. The angels have 6 wings, 2 covering their feet, 2 covering their face, and 2 outstretched, ready to fly. The seraphims on the east side are original, while the others are just painted copies. But here's a really interesting fact. And like we talked about last week, with the stories in the Bible having an echo in other pagan cultures, the seraphim too are not limited only to the Hebrew Bible. They are found all over the ancient world, most notably in Egypt. And here's one now. So, you might be asking yourself, hold on, Paul, that isn't a seraphim, that's a snake. And even weirder, it's a snake with wings. How can that be related to the seraphim in the Bible? Well, stay tuned.
Okay, another question that came up from this video was that we showed the serpent connected to a character in the Bible, characters in the Bible called Seraphim.
They're in the book of Isaiah.
They're in the book of Isaiah.
Yes.
The only time they appear called that.
Correct.
And what they seem to be are what we elsewhere in Scripture would know of as the cherubim.
Correct.
These creatures, animal-like, wings, flying around, protecting God's throne, worshiping God. Isaiah has this vision. He calls them seraphim.
Yep.
And you pointed out that seraphim means snake.
It's the Hebrew word for snake.
It's the Hebrew word for snake.
Correct.
Now, many people have checked into that and said, well, when I look up the word seraphim, snake is a possible translation, but also just the idea of the burning ones is a translation. So are we pushing it too far? Can it just actually mean a burning one and not necessarily a snake? And are we trying to too neatly tie this idea of the serpent in the garden to a spiritual being in God's throne?
So a lot of this is due to confusion about how the Hebrew language works.
Okay.
So maybe just facts on the ground. The Hebrew word seraphim, it's a Hebrew plural noun. The im is a plural. So the noun is just saraf.
Okay.
Saraf. So the noun saraf appears 8 times in the Hebrew Bible. And never once does it refer to a burning creature or a creature on fire. It means snake every single one of those times.
In the Hebrew scriptures.
In the Hebrew Bible.
Every time.
Yes.
It means snake.
If you look up the word in the standard Hebrew, Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament, or in the classic Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew lexicon, these are dictionaries of ancient biblical Hebrew. You just look up the word saraf, and the first meaning is snake. And then they give you there's only 8 examples in the Hebrew Bible. It's in Numbers 21, the saraf that bite the Israelites, and then he makes a bronze saraf, Moses does, to go on a staff. Moses talks about the Seraphim that bit the Israelites in the wilderness, that same story. In the book of Isaiah, he mentions these Seraphim 3 times. One of them is in that vision Isaiah sees. And then in 2 other times, in Isaiah 14 and Isaiah 30, he talks about a flying seraph, a seraph with wings that flies. And it's in poetry, and he's describing a flying snake. He just says it straight up.
It's very clear.
A flying snake, yeah. So the flying snakes occur 3 times in the book of Isaiah. But for some reason, our modern translations translate it snake in Isaiah chapters 14 and 30, but they just don't translate it in Isaiah 6.
That's snake.
They just spell it with English letters, Seraphim. But it is the standard Hebrew word for snake.
Where does this idea of the burning ones come up? Why is that in some dictionaries?
So the Hebrew words are built off of a 3-letter root.
Okay.
The 3-letter root, sin, resh, pe, saraf, appears in a verb, and saraf, and the verb that means to set on fire, to burn. There also is a noun built off of that root, serapha, that means like burning.
A burnt thing.
A burnt thing, that's right. So, but the way Hebrew nouns work is they'll build different words off of a 3-letter root. So the reason why these snakes are called seraphim is because they bite and they're poisonous. And I've never gotten a snake bite before. Have you ever been? You've hunted rattlesnakes.
Yeah.
I never have.
Yeah, I've never been bit though.
But it's the sensation of burning, apparently.
Sure.
When you get bit.
Yeah.
So a burning snake makes perfect sense. It's a venomous snake.
Right.
Yeah.
So those ideas are connected.
Correct. Yeah.
So seraph means snake.
Yep.
But as a verb,
it
means burning.
To burn. Yeah.
To burn.
Correct.
And then you said there's a time where it's also used as a noun to mean.
There's a different noun that's
but
not
it's
seraphim.
Oh, it's not seraphim.
Serapha, that can refer to burning as a noun.
Okay. But that still begs the question then, why is it that you open a dictionary and seraphim, sometimes it says the burning ones? Is that just tradition?
There's no dictionary of biblical Hebrew that I know of that has burning one as a meaning for
there isn't.
The entry of seraphim.
No. Oh, okay. You look it up in a Hebrew dictionary and it's going to say snake.
Yeah, correct. Some people use an older tool from the 19th century called Strong's Concordance. And I did look that up, and actually here, real quick. Strong's, and the first meaning they give is burning, and then they say figuratively of a poisonous serpent. So even though they say burning at first, they immediately qualify to talk figuratively about burning a serpent. So I'm not sure where this idea of the seraphim as burning ones came from, but it's not based on any of the evidence in biblical Hebrew. So it means snake.
So what Isaiah saw...
What Isaiah saw are flying snakes.
Are flying snakes.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't have been an uncommon symbol for him to see.
No, it's actually a very common symbol. Ancient Egypt depicted flying snakes as an icon of creatures surrounding their gods. And actually we have, I included this in the study notes that you can download for this video on our website. But there have been found ancient Israelite clay seals with the names of kings on them and stuff. And they show snakes with wings. There's a snake with 2 wings and a snake with 4 wings. So this was an Israelite icon to talk about the cherubim that surround the divine throne. And, they look like cows, they look like lions, they look like eagles, they look like snakes.
Yeah.
They are always multiform in how they appear. So anyway, that's kind of nerdy Hebrew language.
Yeah.
Ancient culture.
That's a big category shift for
the flying snake.
For me and for a lot of people.
Correct.
So just it kind of takes a moment to go, really?
Yes, that's right. So what's important in the book of Isaiah especially is that when he uses the noun seraph, one of those other times in Isaiah 14, he's talking actually about the ruler of Babylon, who earlier in the same chapter was described as the one who tried to ascend to God's throne and make his throne above God's throne.
Yeah. So this is a connected image.
Yeah, so Isaiah 14 is actually tracking and linking into the Genesis 3 story and trying to help us see that snake was a heavenly being that disguised itself to deceive the humans and was actually trying to make a power grab. and trying to get the humans to do the same. So Isaiah 14 it's intentional that the word snake appears there in connection with the ruler Babylon, modeled after the Genesis 3 story.
Yeah.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes? The passage from Isaiah where the Seraphim are referenced is as follows. In the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, lofty and exalted, with the train of his robe filling the temple. Seraphim stood above him, each having 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called out to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. Isaiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. Once you understand that seraphim means snake, and that's a big category shift for me, I'm sure it is for you as well, and it's not just any old snake, but a flying snake, you start to see them everywhere in the ancient world. I mean, you can't help see them all over the place. This is a world cultural phenomenon. Here in this picture, you see a seraphim that has been embedded into the crown of the Egyptian pharaoh. It is an incredibly common image all throughout Egypt. Here it is again. This time it's found on a breastplate that was found in Egypt. And once again, flying snakes. More flying snake imagery in Egypt. I mean, you can't swing a dead cat and not hit a half a dozen of these things. They are literally all over the place. When Easter comes around this year and we all sit down to watch the 10 Commandments, as we do every year, I bet you're going to look at Yul Brynner a little different and notice what's in his crown. Flying snake. Again, over and over and over. Seraphim. They're everywhere. And there's a term for flying snakes. You know what that term is? Dragons. And that even opens up the more possibilities to see seraphim all over the place. And dragons appear all over the world, in every culture and every time period. They are hugely significant in China. There they do not have the sinister reputation that they have in the West, but are revered as symbols of power, wisdom, and good fortune. They are often associated with the emperor and maintaining a cosmic balance, but they also act as a guard for the emperor and a guard for China. They have a similar reputation in Japan and Korea. There they are closely tied to water deities and mountain spirits. Dragon tattoos, for example, such as you see here, are very popular. Japanese dragon tattoos blend tradition and art, symbolizing wisdom, strength, and protection in Japanese culture. These tattoos and the dragons that they are representing are believed to protect and watch over families and homes, bringing happiness. They symbolize bravery, wisdom, and strength, and represent value and virtue. So definitely dragons are the good guys in the East. They aren't in the West, however, or in the Middle East. In Europe and the Middle East, dragons have a far more sinister and evil reputation. In Christian iconography, for example, the dragon is almost always meant to represent either sin or Satan himself. The most classic example of this imagery is the countless depictions of St. George slaying the dragon. In the book of Revelation, for example, in Revelation 12, Satan is represented as a dragon. And that isn't just fantastical imagery. Of course, it's fantastical, but it does make you wonder, and it hints at something. Satan is a fallen divine creature. Perhaps this is hinting at a reality that Satan is one of the highest creatures that God created, possibly was a seraphim, and therefore this dragon imagery might make a little bit more sense that way. And it isn't only Christian Europe. This imagery of the dragon goes way back. For example, In the Norse mythology, affected really by Christian thought, dragons like Fafnir guard treasure and represent greed and corruption. So again, the recurring image of the dragon throughout all these cultures does make one wonder, why is this image of a flying snake showing up over and over and over in every culture? In Greek mythology, the hero Hercules battled the Hydra, a multi-headed dragon whose heads regenerate after each one is cut off. In the myth of Jason and the Golden Fleece, Jason, as one of his quests, confronts who else? A dragon. If you remember from last week when we were discussing the parallels between the ancient myths of the Near East and Greece and throughout the world and the Bible, we told the Babylonian story of the chaos monster, Tiamat. Well, Tiamat was what else? A dragon. Even in the New World, with the Aztecs, for example, a culture that has zero contact with the cultures of Asia and Europe, dragons play a central role. The Mayans and the Incans, they too had dragons throughout their mythology. Here, however, in the Aztec world, they worshipped this dragon. Now, they considered him a good guy, but he was far from good, because this is the god Quetzalcoatl, the dragon god of the Aztec religion, who required an endless diet of human flesh and human blood in order to sustain the world. So definitely a bad guy. No, dragons have been a part of every single human culture from the very beginning. And it should make one pause, especially considering their significance as the Seraphim in the Bible, and the fact that all cultures, baked into their DNA, have this idea of high-level divine beings being depicted as flying snakes. Kind of makes you wonder. In the video where Tim Mackey was referring to these royal seals that were found in Israel, showing these flying snakes, I found that very interesting. Here's a picture of them. So here again, you can see the look of these seraphim on these royal seals mirror identically to those that you find in Egypt. So this is a very common image throughout the world. And I will say, just for me personally, understanding the nature of the seraphim and this snake imagery makes the bronze serpent story of Moses make a lot more sense. I never understood that story in the Bible where you have Moses, lifting up an image of a bronze snake, and people are looking at it and they're being healed. It always seemed very strange to me and confusing, but understanding this connection to the seraphim, now it makes a lot more sense. I'm releasing this podcast in October, so we're right in the heart of fall, and that can only mean one thing: they're defrosting Mariah Carey, and soon enough we will be hearing her singing "All I Want for Christmas Is You" every place we go in America. I mean, Christmas is coming, and if you are like my wife and I, we love sending and receiving Christmas cards. And how many of these cards that we get or send are festooned with angels all over them? I mean, it is probably one of the most common images that you'll see on a Christmas card. Angels and Christmas, they just go together. So, it makes you think about what's coming up for this Christmas. So I was thinking about, in light of this new information about the seraphim and the fact that it means snake, I was going to propose to my wife that we update our Christmas card this year to make it more biblically accurate. I doubt, however, she's going to go for it. The next rank of angels we're going to discuss today will be the cherubim. Now, if I say the word cherubim, the image that most people will conjure up in their minds is one of a chubby, cute little baby with wings. Our culture is saturated with this image. This particular image I have on the screen, I've seen on countless Christmas cards, tote bags, posters. I mean, it's everywhere. But it is about as far removed from the reality of the cherubim as it could possibly be. So we really need to exercise this chubby little babies with wings image from our head. Because in the Bible, the cherubim are anything but cuddly. I mean, they are hybrid creatures with multiple faces, like a human face in the lion body or an ox body with eagle wings. They have a fiery presence. I mean, see Ezekiel 1 and 10, for example. They guard sacred spaces like Eden's entrance from the book of Genesis, chapter 3, and the Ark of the Covenant, Exodus 25. And if they are guards, one could assume that encountering one of these creatures is going to result in some pretty negative consequences. They symbolize divine majesty, mystery, and holiness, often appearing as throne bearers of God. And there has been a shift over time in our artistic depictions of these divine bouncers. I'm not sure why it happened, but it certainly did. The shift began in the Renaissance and continued on through Baroque art, where artists drew inspiration from the Greco-Roman motifs that were just then being discovered, like in the ruins of Pompeii, for example. Putti, that's what you're seeing here, that's what these little winged babies are referred to in Roman mythology, were mythological figures. They were always naked, winged infants, and they're often associated with Cupid or Eros. You see them all over Valentine's Day cards every year, which, to be honest, is probably more where they belong, not with the cherubs. They relate to Cupid, but this image of Cupid got grafted onto cherubs in the Renaissance. Artists like Raphael and Michelangelo began blending these playful figures with Christian themes, especially in depictions of heaven and divine love. And then over time, what happened is that these putti, these winged babies, got conflated with cherubs, especially in Western European art, leading to the popular image of baby-faced angels with wings that we see today all over the place. The idea behind this reinterpretation was probably good intentions, but it's not accurate. But it had several purposes. One, to present these things as innocence and purity. I mean, babies symbolize untainted goodness, absolutely, aligning with spiritual ideals. Accessibility. There was a belief, probably not incorrect, to think that showing cherubs as they actually would be, which would probably invoke horror and terror if you actually encountered one, were made as too inaccessible. So you can access a little winged baby more than some sort of ferocious, multi-formed creature like an actual cherub. And then the romantic and sentimental appeal, especially in Victorian times. And definitely in our modern pop culture, cherubs became the emblems of love, protection, and sweetness. So that's how cherubs got turned into these little babies. But we're going to try to, over this next few minutes, we're going to try to put them back where they belong. If you go down to Hobby Lobby or Michael's or any gift shop in America, and you will be certainly find innumerable examples of these images as little statues. They're often depicted in little small garden statues, cute, cuddly, but inaccurate. I mean, if you remember that cherubs are supposed to be, throne guardians, you certainly aren't using these things to guard your house. They're not going to scare anybody off. Again, adorable, but very inaccurate. Because cherubs, or cherubs in Hebrew, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but that was my best shot. Cherubim is the plural, are some of the most fearsome and terrifying creatures in the Bible. I mean, if you see one, they will kill you. That is their function. They are the guardians of God's throne, and they keep the unholy out of the most sacred place. And rather than being harmless babies with wings, they are awesome hybrid creatures with the head of a man and the body of a bull. Some have wings. Some are part lion. I can't imagine the terror that they would strike in the heart of someone if you actually encountered one of these beings. If they show up, you're in trouble. They do show up a couple times in the Bible, most notably in the book of Ezekiel. I mean, Ezekiel's vision of the cherubim is one of the most dazzling and symbolically rich passages in the Hebrew Bible. Also, one of the weirdest. I mean, it's equal parts cosmic spectacle and theological depth. These cherubs appear primarily in Ezekiel's chapters 1 and 10. And this vision that Ezekiel has marks the beginning of his prophetic ministry during the Babylonian exile around 593 BC. At the time, Ezekiel when he has this vision, he is by the Kebar River when the heavens open and he sees visions of God. What unfolds in his vision is a divine throne room encounter with the chariot of God, borne by 4 living creatures. And these four living creatures, are identified as the cherubim. Each cherub has 4 faces, a human, a lion, an ox, and an eagle, symbolizing intelligence, strength, service, and swiftness. They each have 4 wings, 2 covering their bodies, 2 stretched upward to touch the wings of the others, similar to the seraphim. They have straight legs with feet like a calf's hoof. They have hands under the wings, suggesting hidden agency and divine action. They move without turning, facing all directions simultaneously. So it's very hard to get your head around this image. Their motion is guided by the Spirit in perfect harmony. Each cherub is accompanied by a wheel within a wheel, which we'll be talking about when we get to the thrones, capable of moving in any direction. These wheels are an example to themselves that we will be discussing, the Ophanim. Above these cherubs is the firmament, like crystal, and the throne, like sapphire, and a radiant figure, like a man, surrounded by light, with rainbow-like brilliance, the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. That's from Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 26 to 28. In chapter 10, the vision of Ezekiel intensifies. A man in linen is told to take burning coals from among the cherubim and scatter them over Jerusalem, a symbolic act of judgment. And the glory of the Lord departs from the temple, signifying divine withdrawal due to Israel's corruption. So this particular vision of Ezekiel is probably one of the clearest examples we have where the cherubim are discussed in depth. And just like the seraphim, cherubim show up all over the ancient world, primarily in Babylon, but they also show up in Egypt. Cherubim show up in Babylon, in Assyria, and all throughout the Mesopotamia and Persia. The image you see here is a picture of one of the winged bulls on display in the British Museum. This is one of the pair of colossal human-headed winged bulls. These are magical figures that once guarded an entrance to the Assyrian king Sargon II, who ruled from 721 to 705 BC. And they were considered throne guardians of the king. And cherubim are depicted early on in the Bible, performing their function as they are designed. Here you see the cherubim armed with a flaming sword. They kicked Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden and kept them out in Genesis 3. and they are placed at the entrance of the Eden to keep man out. Cherubs are the true badasses of the Bible, so watch out. Where seraphim are the highest rank of the unseen realm and worship God on his throne night and day, cherubim, the next rank, are the guardians of that sacred space, and they stand at the boundary of heaven and earth, and they protect that sacred space. This is exactly the symbolic role that they play in Israel's tabernacle and temple later in the biblical narrative. References to images of the cherubim are all over the biblical narrative. Images of the cherubim were embroidered into the curtains of the tabernacle from Exodus chapter 26, verse 1, and on the veil that marked off the Holy of Holies from Exodus 26, verse 31. 2 cherubim were sculpted of gold and placed on top of the Ark of the Covenant from Exodus chapter 25. This was the focus of God's presence in the Holy of Holies. What cherubim look like is very confusing. I mean, seraphim, for example, it's clearly that they are flying snakes. But with cherubim, the image used to describe them keeps changing. I mean, for example, they have one face like the human in the book of Exodus and in 1 Kings, but in Ezekiel, they have 2 faces. And then later on in Ezekiel, they have 4 faces, a lion, a human, an ox, and an eagle. And I'll be honest with you, I can't really grasp what a being with 4 faces would even look like. And that leads me to this conclusion. I mean, part of me thinks that this is yet another example of our limited human senses and finite comprehension we're unable to grasp true reality when confronted with a higher being like this. And so we have to grab onto what we can explain in order to make sense of it. And just like the seraphim, cherubim are everywhere, in every culture. I mean, here are some pictures from Assyria on the left, Babylon in the center, and Persia on the right. And they all are depicting the same type of thing. These hybrid creatures with the body of the bull and the head of a man and the wings of an eagle. And they're all depicted or shown in their role as throne guardians. It is an incredibly common image throughout the world, and you see it everywhere. Here's another image from artifact found in the British Museum. 2 statues of cherubs that were found in Nineveh that once guarded the gates of that ancient city. No doubt about it, these are cherubs. And it's not just in Assyria and Babylon. Here is a picture of probably one of the most famous cherubs in the world, although most people wouldn't recognize it as a cherub, but it is one. It's the Sphinx in Egypt. You see all the same characteristics. The head of a man, the body of a lion, guarding a royal tomb at the Great Pyramid. Same idea, different culture. Here's a Greek cherub, also known as a Sphinx. Same thing, different name. In the Greek tradition, the Sphinx is a treacherous and merciless being with the head of a woman. That's the difference. The haunches of a lion and the wings of a bird, usually an eagle. According to Greek myth, the Sphinx will challenge those whom she encounters to answer a riddle and kills and eats them when they fail to solve the riddle. The deadly version of the Sphinx appears in the myth of Oedipus. Both the Greek and Egyptian sphinxes were thought of as guardians, often of tombs, and statues of them often flank the entrance to temples, tombs, and palaces. Another creature that fulfills essentially the same role as the cherub, and probably is therefore the same thing, and is also a hybrid mashup of creatures, is the griffin, shown here, with the body, tail, and back legs of a lion, and the head and wings of an eagle with its talons on its front legs. Because the lion was traditionally considered the king of the beasts, and the eagle the king of the birds, By the Middle Ages, this hybrid creature known as the griffin was thought to be an especially powerful and majestic creature. Since classical antiquity, griffins were known for guarding treasures and priceless possessions. You see griffins everywhere in the Middle Ages. It appears cherubs just keep reappearing everywhere in every culture throughout all time, over and over and over. And it should make you pause and wonder, why does every human culture seem to have the same idea about a hybrid mashup creature guarding sacred space? Kind of makes you wonder. Now here's a more subtle form in our modern day, guarding the entrance to the New York Public Library. Now they're just lions, but I actually kind of wish the New York Public Library, why doesn't it go all in? Let's get a real cherub out there with a four-headed creature with wings. I guarantee you people would bring their books back on time if they had to face that. And this last group we're going to discuss today in the highest triad of the ranks of angels is the weirdest of all. So strap in. It's going to get crazy. This is a rank of angels called thrones. In Christian angelology, thrones are a class of angels. This is based on several passages in Colossians and in 1 Peter that talked about Christ going up to heaven, where the angels and authority and powers had been made subject to him. In another book that was highly influential in the early church was the book of Enoch. And according to the second book of Enoch, thrones are seen by Enoch in the seventh heaven. The thrones are also known as the Ophanim, which means wheel, and they are considered to be creatures that function as the actual chariots of God, and they are driven by the cherubs. They are categorized by peace and submission. God rests upon the thrones. Thrones are depicted as great wheels, containing many eyes that are all-seeing, and reside in the area of the cosmos, where material form begins to take shape. They chant glorias to God and remain forever in his presence. They mete out divine justice and maintain the cosmic harmony of all universal laws. They are also considered to be the angels of authority, and all lower classes of angels access the higher levels through them. They are undoubtedly one of the weirder images in the Bible, and there's been a lot of questions about the thrones. Are they an angel? Are they a living creature? Are they a machine, like a chariot? They defy easy categorization or description. They are discussed the most in one book, the book of Ezekiel, where he has his vision of the wheels, but the wheels have eyes, and they're wheels within wheels. I mean, it's definitely a weird, trippy image. And to help us get our heads around this, I found a fantastic video with some incredible images that explains this strangest angel in the Bible, the Ophanim. Enjoy.
The two most mysterious angels in the Bible. Number 1, the Ophanim. The Ophanim may be the strangest angels in the Bible. Ophanim is the ancient Hebrew word for wheels. The singular is Ophanim. Of particular interest are the wheels of the throne of God, mentioned in Ezekiel's vision. Ophanim are mentioned in Ezekiel 1:15 through 21. The Bible is brimming with incredible imagery, and God gives us a look into a realm to which human eyes rarely have access through his holy word. We are never disappointed when we enter Scripture, eager to learn more about God, his methods, and his intentions. The mysteries of the universe, the heavens, and spiritual creatures are revealed in the pages of the Bible so that we can better understand him. The Ophanim reveal our God as king and affirm the sovereignty of his reign. Ezekiel has been in exile for 5 years when God appeared to him by a river in Sheba, which is now in the Middle East. God used this encounter to start Ezekiel's ministry as a prophet by showing him an astounding vision. It is easier to define the Ophanim depicted in Ezekiel's vision After considering the entirety of the revelation, God chooses to open the heavens in front of Ezekiel's temporal eyes. Ezekiel witnesses a foreboding cloud of lightning and flame coming from the direction of the north. Within the cloud, 4 lighted beings shine brightly. Although the beings appear as humans, they are not human in any way. Each possesses 4 different faces: 1 human face, 1 lion face, 1 ox face, and 1 eagle face. The prophet doesn't record these creatures by name in Ezekiel 1, where the recounting of his vision begins, but by chapter 10, they're identified as cherubim. Ezekiel 1:15-21. Now as I looked at the living beings, behold, there was 1 wheel on the ground beside the living beings, for each of the 4 of them. The appearance of the wheels and their workmanship was like sparkling topaz, and all 4 of them had the same form, their appearance and workmanship being as if 1 wheel were within another. Whenever they moved in any of their 4 directions without turning as they moved. And for their rims, they were high and awesome, and the rims of all 4 of them were covered with eyes all around. Whenever the living beings moved, the wheels moved with them, and whenever the living being rose from the earth, the wheels rose also. Wherever the spirit was about to go, they would go in that direction, and the wheels rose just as they did, for the spirit of the living beings was in the wheels. Whenever those went, they went, and whenever those stopped, they stopped. And whenever those rose from the earth, the wheels rose just as they did, for the spirit of the living beings was in the wheels. What Ezekiel saw or described in this passage is difficult to visualize in its entirety. It is presumably an image of a magnificent chariot with 4 wheels that is being the throne of God. The scene gives the impression of continuous motion and activity, not only on the part of the living beings themselves, but also on the part of the throne that God sits on. The sense seems to be that the wheels and their workings could be moved in any direction, but there was no sense of chaos or disorder to their movements. A popular Bible commentator stated about this, like a ball bearing, they could move in any direction without any steering mechanism. As for their rims, they were so high they were awesome, and their rims were full of eyes. Again, it's difficult to imagine in one's mind exactly what Ezekiel saw or stated in this passage. The description of full of eyes was how John described the cherubim themselves. The sense is of excellent knowledge and intelligence. They are not dead metal. Their livingness is shown by their eyes, with which they can see the way, and by their life link with the living creatures above them. The 4 wheels and their workings moved in step with the 4 cherubim as they rotated. They were linked together in such a way that Ezekiel was able to write, "The spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels." Ophanim are also mentioned similarly in Ezekiel 10:9-13. Ezekiel 1:18 describes eyes in reference with the wheels. Here we learn that the cherubim themselves were full of eyes all around, and this fits the later characterization of cherubim found in Revelation 4:6. The image seems bizarre to the modern reader, but one must remember that this is a visionary experience and surrealistic features may overwhelm realism. In the passages above, the throne of God is set on wheels, Ophanim, and then pushed by 4 angels. There are wheels inside of wheels at cross angles, with the effect that the throne can move in any direction without having to turn. The angels who are powering the throne also have 4 faces, 1 facing each direction, so they can likewise travel in any order without turning. The angels are identified as cherubim. The Ophanim has been a point of fascination for many, and later Jewish apocalyptic writers gave them a life of their own. The wheels themselves came to be identified as a distinct category of angel, the Ophanim. Seraphim and cherubim are mentioned in scriptures as angels, and to this some have added the Ophanim, also spelled Ophanim. Ezekiel sees a crystal vault that is so awe-inspiring that the only word that comes to mind for him to use to describe it is awesome. This vault is located above the heads of the 4 cherubim and the Ophanim. Above the vault, he sees a brilliant and glittering throne, and high above the throne, he sees what is described as the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. Ezekiel immediately falls face down after having his eyes opened to the majesty of God's splendor, and he then hears the booming voice of the Almighty, instructing him in his mission to bring the punishment of God onto Israel for their disobedience. Why do some refer to the Ophanim as angels? There is not a single mention of the Ophanim in the Bible being angelic creatures, but apocryphal Jewish writers branded them as a class of angel and list them in their hierarchy of angels along with Seraphim and Cherubim because of the Ophanim's unique lifelikeness, their supernatural power, and their close proximity to God's throne, not to mention the multitude of eyes. Whether or not the Ophanim are actually angelic beings or merely a divinely powered mechanism of multi-dimensional transport doesn't matter. What does matter is the Ophanim's function in displaying God's glory to Ezekiel and every other believer who would one day read his account and gain a renewed vision of God's kingship. What do the Ophanim reveal about God? Both in appearance and operation, the Ophanim that appeared in Ezekiel's vision demonstrate God's absolute dominion over the entire cosmos. The omnidirectional wheels themselves serve as a constant reminder to us that the God we serve is omnipresent, meaning that he's able to be in all places at all times. As the Spirit of Lord guides the cherubim, Ezekiel 1:12, that same Spirit indwells the Ophanim. When the creatures moved, they also moved. When the creatures stood still, they also stood still. And when the creatures rose from the ground, the wheels rose along with them, because their spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. Ezekiel 1:20. This symbolic unity of submission displays God's supreme authority and right to rule and reign, his omnipotence. And the eyes that cover the wheels and the cherubim are symbolic of God's omniscience. He is all-seeing, all-knowing. Why is it important for Christians to know about the supernatural realm? In Ephesians 6:12, we are told that our struggle is not against flesh. God desires believers to be aware of the world beyond what our temporal eyes can see, so that we, in the Lord's mighty power, can be prepared to take on whatever scheme the enemy has in store. Extremism is prevalent in today's society. On one end of the scale, there are believers who downplay the supernatural part of their faith and insist on maintaining a naturalistic worldview, which is characterized by an exclusive reliance on the truths of doctrinal teachings for day-to-day living. And on the opposite end of the spectrum are those people who are so preoccupied with the spiritual realm because of the allure it holds for them that they are of little help on earth. We must first ensure that our eyes are open to the reality of the situation. When Elisha's servant was terrified by the surrounding enemy in 2 Kings 6:16, the prophet tells the young man, "Don't be afraid."
This vision of Ezekiel's wheels has been great fodder for the History Channel, especially its long-running and very dubious series, Ancient Aliens. Which leads to an interesting question. Consider this. Popular culture has definitely embraced this idea of these biblical visions as encounters with aliens from another planet. I would probably bet money that this vision of Ezekiel, where he sees the wheels spinning within wheels, is probably the most talked about book of the Bible and on secular TV there is. And people love to talk about it. They take it seriously. They analyze it. But it all comes back to this idea that they are interpreting this, because of their worldview, as obviously a sign of ancient UFOs. But I'll ask this question, and it's a good question. Why is it so much easier for people to buy that idea of material beings visiting the Earth from another galaxy, rather than accepting the idea of, yes, these are aliens, but you're seeing visions of another realm, the supernatural realm? That seems to never be part of any discussion, but it's always a discussion about ancient aliens. I think this is an example of something I've talked about throughout the series, about how where people will read their own worldview back into the text. And because we live in a materialistic worldview, even religious people, we just can't help it. This is the waters we swim in. We have to interpret this as, okay, these weird visions, they must be ancient UFOs. I think it's sad. I think it's much richer and probably more accurate to read it as it was meant to be read. Look, the seen and the unseen, and the material and the spiritual continuously overlap throughout the Bible and probably continue to overlap today. And this vision of Ezekiel's is just an example of that. And it appears Ezekiel encountered just one of these events where this overlap occurred. So when you're thinking about this, or you're talking to some of your more secular-minded friends, open them up to the possibility of interpreting this vision the way it was meant to be interpreted, as a vision of God's throne and the beings that surround all of us up in the unseen realm. I do love a good meme, and this is a particularly good one, at least for me. Look, I'm a History Channel fan from when it first started, back in probably the late 70s, early 80s. So I've loved the History Channel for years. But I have to say, there's been a decline in History Channel for a long time. I mean, it used to be I would watch the History Channel every day. There were a lot of, I'll be honest with you, especially in the early days, it was all World War II documentaries back to back to back. And even for somebody like me, which there's no end to how many I could watch, even I was like, okay, there's got to be something else on. But lately, I mean, in the last 15 years, it's all ice road truckers or ancient aliens or storage wars. And there are very few history documentaries actually showing on the History Channel, and that's a shame. And especially, I think the most egregious example of this is the show Ancient Aliens, which I couldn't help but enjoy this particular meme poking fun at the way the History Channel has devolved over time. And while we're talking about memes, here's a good one I like, the difference between Renaissance angels and biblical angels. I think that it kind of sums it up. Look, today has been crazy, no doubt. But get ready. It gets, believe it or not, even crazier in weeks to come, so stay tuned. I will say this, though. If this episode does nothing else, I hope it shakes loose some of the cutesy angel images you probably have burned into your brain from when you were a kid. Angels, and especially cherubim, are many things, but cute isn't one of them. I will see you next week as we continue our journey through the angelic realms as we deal with the next set of angels in the choirs of angels. See you next week. Goodbye. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us. Next week, we'll be exploring yet another hero from our Christian past. So be sure to tune in. Until then, keep your faith warm, your cappuccino hot and frothy, and have a great week. See you next week for another Saturday Cappuccino with the Saints.